All right, I got a great topic because I want to tell you that whatever your velocity is, it should be more.
It should be higher.
It should go higher and keep increasing higher forever. Should your velocity be increasing forever? Should it just be like the hockey stick that just goes up and up and up forever and ever and ever?
Yeah, velocity. Wow, yeah. This is an interesting topic because there's just so much misunderstanding out there about velocity and why it's used and should it go up, etc. So I think this is a really good topic. Before we get into it, if you've enjoyed our previous videos, subscribe and like down below.
Go do the thing.
So yeah, velocity, should it go up all the time? Well, we can dice it two different ways. Sure, why not? And why? Right?
All of our 5s are now 8s.
Yeah.
Management is happy.
That's right.
We're
Yes.
done. Woo!
Easy.
Thanks for coming to the...
It's easy to increase velocity.
Thanks for coming to Arguing Agile. Make your 5s 8s and get your bonuses and...
There you go.
there you go. Find
The
new
team
jobs.
is now suddenly a high-performing team because their velocity is up.
High performing.
That's
Highfalutin. Highfalutin team.
And once the team figures that out, that's what you're going to get.
Where's the scrum? I don't know who I'm arguing with now. Yelling at?
Yelling Agile?
Yeah, yelling Agile. I don't know who I'm yelling about. Where's this dogma coming from? The only place that I understand is it's written in the Scrum Guide, so people go back to that and repeat that. That's the only place that makes sense to me.
Yeah, but the Scrum Guide doesn't say it should go up forever.
Right, yeah.
Right. But yes, you're right. It is the word is mentioned in the Scrum Guide, so they do a find and they go, we have to do this. But then it goes from there to this other weird world, which is it should go up. There's an implicit expectation, sometimes not so implicit, demand, right, by others, we'll come back to that it should go up because
put a pin in that.
Yeah. So they link that to some kind of level of performance, I guess, or output.
Productivity, maybe. Output, productivity.
Yeah, and they go, well, the higher that number is, the more we're squeezing out of the team. And I think a lot of times people that say it should go up are people that don't really understand the concept of velocity, why it exists, as I believe was intended when they mentioned it in the Scrum Guide. They didn't say it should go up. So yeah, so should it go up? No, right? Why? Why should it go up all the time? And why would you think you're getting more out of your team just because a number, more or less arbitrary number really, increases over time with every sprint?
Yeah.
Like I say, once your team figures that out, you'll get that. Right, your point. Right? Every 5's now an 8, and every 8's now a 13. So yeah, that's what you'll get because that's what you're measuring.
It's real difficult to figure out where to put the hook into this one, to figure out the contrarian opinion on this one. I guess the contrarian opinion on this one, if I'm gonna do anything, is I need a metric. Like let's say, for example, I'm a development manager.
Yeah.
I need a metric to know like how much productivity my teams are putting out.
Yeah, so you could always use Slock, right? Lines of code written and all of that stuff. I mean, people used to do that, like LOC.
That's not a great metric.
I know it's not. There are many that are not great metrics, and some are just downright dangerous, including the one I just mentioned.
Yeah, right.
But really, you've got to home in on this and say, what is the metric measuring? If you're a development manager and your focus is on throughput of work, I mean, right?
Sure,
Or output, then you can find any number of metrics that will satisfy that itch.
Yeah.
You could say, well, let's just go with time or story points delivered per person.
Yeah.
Right? I've seen that as well, right? So that will force your team over time to take on more work because they know you're measuring that. But then in turn, they'll do exactly what they will do, as we just said, estimate everything higher or estimate every task. A 1 hour task over here, a 2 hour task is now a 6 hour task because that's what you're measuring.
Before we get into the meat of this category, if I'm going to break down a team member, a scrum master, and a product owner on the team, is there a metric that each should care about? The reason I ask that is because I'm thinking about velocity, and I'm jumping through some mental hoops trying to figure out how to argue against it. And the reason I'm jumping through mental hoops is because every time I jump through the hoop, it brings me back to the same thing. Every time I jump through a hoop, I'm like, well, maybe if you're just inflating your estimates and we want to knock off all the games with the metrics or whatever, then we can just count the throughput of stories, doing the whole hashtag no estimates thing. But if the team has control or some semi-control of the way the stories get written, they can break the stories down to as smallest, most granular grain of sand level possible and still play the same game with number of story throughput. So this game never ends once you start playing it.
Yeah, exactly. So you've got to understand, I guess, right? I'm not the world's expert on this, but you've got to understand why. I'm like a 2-year-old now. Why do you want to measure this? What are you trying to satisfy here? Right. Are you trying to justify that you have a N number of team members and you have a team of N, and you want to make sure that you're trying to justify that hire, so to speak? Or are you looking at delivering something that the team exists there in the first place for, right? Like business value, for instance, and things like that. So depending on what you're trying to measure, you'll get what you're after. Now, if you're measuring business value, the team could try to play that game with number of stories. They'll break them down, but the score on the business value isn't ascribed by the team.
Right.
So it doesn't matter. A story that has, let's say, a business value of 5 out of 10, they can break it up into 5 stories of 1 each. It's still 5.
Yeah, right.
I think that's the allure of using business value.
Yeah. Well, that's where I was kind of going with, like, if business value is the product person's metric and the velocity is a team's metric. Like, I don't know if the Scrum Master even needs a metric. Well, the Scrum Master probably does have a metric, but they're not that, like, I don't feel the Scrum Guide probably doesn't embrace the Scrum Master using metrics of their own, and most Scrum Masters are probably not good at tracking the things they probably should be tracking, whatever those are. We've probably just hit on a entire podcast to put off to the side of what metrics should a Scrum Master care about. Not that they're passing along to the team or they're passing to whatever, like just that they care about because they know for themselves that they're making progress and they're doing a good job.
If we're going to do a separate podcast on it, which I agree we should, then we shouldn't really deep dive into that. But there are a bunch of metrics that a Scrum Master should care about. Some are quantifiable, others are not.
Yeah.
Stay tuned for another podcast coming up your way. But coming back to the whole reason for the team's existence. Yeah. I just go back to the basics there. Why do we have a team? And it should be to deliver something to the business. Mm-hmm. And to the customer, really. But the customer can be internal, could be external. It could be IT, for that matter. Sure. It doesn't matter. You have a customer, that's the point. And you're delivering value to the customer. So why not measure something that meters that and say, are we doing a good job of that? Yeah. Now, you don't have a scale for that to start with. You don't just say, well, this team should start on a scale of 1 to 10 at 2 and go up. Maybe they don't. Maybe they start at 5. Maybe they start at 0. It's relative again, right? So what you're looking for is the team consistently delivering business value? Flip side of that, from the business perspective, from the product owner's perspective, in product management, they're looking to see that the team is continuously delivering value, not necessarily that it's a ramp up every sprint, or even, for that matter, a straight line every sprint, right? Yeah. So you're going to have peaks and valleys in your outcomes that you deliver.
Whatever metrics you use.
Because there's headwinds sometimes, and sometimes there's tailwinds, right? So you're going to have that. But a prudent product owner would recognize that and say, due to these other external factors that either couldn't be forecasted or there's not a lot you can do about them, they can accept those overall. So the pattern they would be looking for, is really a constant pace, and that's what what's the term they use in the Scrum Guide? Continuous sustainable pace. Sustainable pace. Sustainability. So that just means, that term to me means, if you can keep a team together, and you should, right? That's great, because you'll reach a level which is natural for that team, whatever that natural level is, and it should stay there. Probably fluctuate. That's fine. But the minute you have a person leave or 2 people leave and somebody joins, or you add some, whatever it is, any changes in the team constituents, you're going to get changes to that. Then that can be correlated. So business should understand that.
I promise we'll come back to stability in a second, because I think stability is the fix for all this. But I think that is the correct answer. But that doesn't necessarily, in the spirit of arguing Agile, like, it doesn't prepare people to deal with the real conversations they're going to deal with, which is coming from people who are used to project management and people who are used to whatever, or people who are just answering demands of their management, basically. I know we like to live in a world where like there must be a logical, competent reason for this ask. No, there's not.
Right.
It's just some random person thinking, look, I could do 10% more. Let me squeeze my team. The reasons people are asking, hey, velocity should be increasing all the time and forever, right? Like that. Why do I have Scrum Masters? Scrum Masters are on my teams to continuously improve, and the measure of continuously improving means I should be getting more velocity. Velocity meaning the metric of productivity. That's the way that they're looking at it, and I'm not arguing for that, although I probably should be arguing for that. Velocity meaning the more throughput you get,
Yep.
the more productive your team is. The more effective my Scrum Master is, the more effective the team will be, which translates into more throughput, and then on and on and on forever. Keep a Scrum Master on the team. That Scrum Master keeps improving the effectiveness of the team. Effectiveness/efficiency of the team keeps rising. I get more productivity as long as I keep the Scrum Master on the team forever. I told Ohm before we started about a story where I had a development manager, or I don't remember what he was, director of development, that he always asked for. His KPI year over year was 10% or 20% more productivity than we did in the previous year. That was his KPI. Now, I invite you to please leave a comment if what a KPI really is, because we all know that's not what a KPI is for, but that's the only environments that I've ever been in that have used KPIs, have used them that way. 20% more velocity from last quarter.
Yeah.
We know that that's kind of a silly ask. Why are people asking that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you make. So what you've just described with that circle of we have a Scrum Master, they improve throughput, right? And that's justification for keeping the Scrum Master. They improve some more.
Sorry.
That's a feedback loop with positive feedback. That's what that is. And in positive feedback loops, they get faster and faster and faster. They're unstable, effectively, in control systems. But I digress. The point is this. There's a natural limit to which the team can deliver. Why people ask more and more is it's grounded in justification.
Yep.
We're paying for a Scrum Master. The team has reached a certain level of throughput. I'll use that word, throughput. So now, if the Scrum Master is still on the payroll, and the team's already at that throughput, then why keep the Scrum Master if not to increase the velocity?
Yeah.
And that's the thinking that reinforces this ask, right? Unfortunately, there's not a lot that the Scrum Master can do other than the way teams can game the whole system. And that's really not progress.
I mean, that's assuming that the team is sticking their neck out for the Scrum Master. And the team is not, they have their own fears and concerns of their own, and they're watching out for themselves. So the Scrum Master is kind of...
Well, the Scrum Master is feeling pressure to increase throughput in terms of story points.
Yeah.
Then the Scrum Master is more likely to either overtly or discreetly, right, influence the team to estimate things higher.
Right.
That's just a natural thing. We've seen it, and it's unfortunate when that happens. So it is really based in justification, which is why people are asking for more, gotta have more, right? So is that progress? Is that a measure of progress? That's really the question.
Is
increasing velocity a measure of progress? Or is that simply an illusion of progress, as I like to call it?
Increasing velocity most certainly is an illusion of progress. But again, since this is arguing Agile, this is a really tough one to answer.
Well, if you think about justification basis, right, for this ask, it looks great if you're the person who actually hired this team to say, look, my team's knocking it out of the park every sprint, and they're just going up and up and up and up, right? Yeah. It looks great. It looks great on your reports to your bosses that you're getting more and more out of this team.
Well, let me give you an example of an actual real world experience that I had. I'll give you an example. I had a team that was like 10 or I think it was like 10 people, 10 or 11 people. I can't remember how many people. It was a big team, team. And I was a product owner, and the team had a Scrum Master who was a converted project manager. And I lobbied real early when I joined the team to split the team in half, Because what I noticed real early, I mean, this is the benefit of having some Agile coaching experience. What I noticed real early was when I would go into a refinement, half the team would be bored because they don't really know that part of the code.
Yeah.
They know they're not probably going to be working on that part of the code. They probably could get into that part of the code or whatever, but they know they're going to be busier on these other stories that are coming up in the backlog that we're going to talk about maybe in the second part of the refinement. And I noticed that real early with this team. And I lobbied pretty hard in the first couple weeks with that company. I was like, we should just split this team in half. I mean, rather than have one giant team of 10, 12, 15, like people listening, oh, giant team of 10, I wish.
Right.
Like, instead of a team of 10 or 11 or 12 or whatever they were, I don't remember, I was like, I'd rather have a team of 5, and I'll deal with them first in the morning, and then I'll jump over to my team of 7, and I'll deal with them, and then we're done. Or I don't remember how many people were on the teams. I bring this story up because I want to say you can't compare velocity of teams to teams.
Yes.
Okay. However, when we split the team in half, one half of the team was doing the same velocity as the entire team before we split them. So theoretically, we have to look at it from the perspective of like one of those teams was brand new, but one of those teams was just the same team as it was before with half the team members.
Right.
So like you kind of have to look at this example kind of as both. They both really were the same team with half the team members. So I would expect them to both kind of clock in at half the velocity. I bring this example up because it doesn't really refute what we're talking about, but there's a star next to this example that says, hey, we got to talk about this one deeper because I'm just cutting a team in half. Before, they did 20 story points worth of velocity per sprint or whatever as a whole team of 10 people. 12 people. I don't remember. For the purposes of this example, I should probably settle on a number, but I'm not going to because it's funnier. So 10, 12 people. When I cut that team in half, because I divided it literally in half, think of it from the perspective of we fired half the employees. I would not have expected this the velocity to stabilize at the same velocity that they were doing when they were the same size as before the split.
How long did it take before it equalized to that?
It was very fast. It was like
Quickly.
2 sprints. It was very fast.
So this is the reason. Here's why that doesn't surprise me. I'll tell you why. Right? When you have a team of, let's say, the big team, before you split them, there are many more channels of communication there.
Yeah, many.
Right?
Yeah.
And when you split that team in half, you've really not reduced the number of communication channels by half. You've reduced them by a huge margin because it's not a linear thing.
Right, yeah.
So that's why you're getting more throughput is because there's less friction, right, in the team in terms of communication, less friction. And so the team members already know how to work well together because they were a team before. You removed half of them. They still know how to work well together. They know each other. And the fact that they're producing at the same level is not surprising. Also, it would also not be surprising if they increased over that because for the same reasons, fewer channels of communication, they know how to work well together. So they could go up a little even, right? So that's why.
Yeah, in that example, they did not only did they increase, but it probably wasn't the best comparison, but to the company I was working at the time, I was saying, hey, your single team before was doing 20 story points. Now, your 2 teams are doing 50 story points. Not only are they doing double, they're doing more than double what they did before. But again, I would never have shown that comparison in any other team, project, whatever that I was in. But because it was the exact same people, just divided to two teams, and they all agreed, they all were on the same page with regard to definition of done, estimating what was a 5, what was an 8, that kind of stuff. They already had all those agreements in place as a team before the split. So each team inherited all the same agreements and everything.
Yep.
So at a certain point, I guess if I'm going to argue, if I'm going to take the other side of this argument, those teams, because they all came from the same team and never really added anyone new, their points, their estimation, their story points, whatever you want to call it, they were standardized, just coincidentally standardized.
Yeah.
I would say not forced into a standardization because we were using SAFe or any of that. We weren't doing any of that. Coincidentally standardized.
Yeah, I think that's it's interesting. Most of the time we don't see that. Most of the time what we see is we have a team, and in order to increase velocity, we'll have another team.
Start splitting your teams, and then you might see that.
Yeah. Or get new members in and go, look, that team was already doing 20 story points, and this team should be doing 20, and why aren't they?
Right.
So that's what we see. The reason why that doesn't work, or even in your case, actually, the reason why if it went down, it would be because, granted, they all knew how to work well together, but now it's two teams, and you may end up in situations where there's dependencies between those two teams, which would be the inertia.
Right.
And that's why you would not deliver at the same level.
Yeah.
But they figure that out pretty quickly.
Yeah, that would be a big issue if there are dependencies between the teams. Because I was the one product owner between the two teams, that never happened.
Right.
I would never serve something up to one team that the other team had to work on it first. I would just never plan things that way.
Sure.
I feel like I've harped on a bunch of illegitimate reasons people ask for the velocity to be continually increasing. I want to talk about the legitimate reason, which is forecasting and predictability. Forget about, for a second, I guess I'm flipping I'm on this side now, so good luck arguing the other side. The only reason that I'm even delving into asking about velocity, I as somebody from the business, is because I need to be able to forecast. And in order to forecast, I can't have the velocity be all over the place. I need the team over time to stabilize to some kind of number. And if, I guess to our topic, if the team is consistently knocking out larger and larger amounts of velocity per sprint over time, then that's great, because at least I can count on them doing a certain base number. They do over and above that, that's great. That's icing on the cake. That's about the only legitimate reason that I could see where if you're going to the team saying, hey, I'm really worried about your velocity, you need to do more, you need to do whatever, like in that kind of conversation, it's from a perspective of I can't build a proper forecast.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think it's a measure to look at, right, when it comes to forecasting, for sure. I think if you come at it from the perspective of the team's velocity is what it is, so don't put any stock in the number. Just use the number. But better yet, use a range of numbers, because what will happen is, everybody knows, initially when the team forms, the velocity is what it is, and then it goes up over time a little bit, and eventually it stabilizes. I would use a number to forecast, right? Given that there is a range, because you could do some analysis and you could say, let's look at the last 3, 4, 5 sprints worth, use a number like that, which is pretty commonly used to mean velocity, the average. You could do that. But a forecast is just that. It's a forecast.
Yeah.
So what you could do there is, let's use numbers to illustrate my example. Let's say the team's velocity is 20, and over the last 4 or 5 sprints, you could use 20 as your baseline number to do your analysis and say, here's the forecast based on 20, X number of points in the backlog, therefore, and do the straight line equation. And then say, well, what if they encounter some issues and instead of 20, they drop to 17?
Yeah.
Right? 20 is the average, and 17 might be your worst case scenario, perhaps. So you could forecast that, and you end up where you end up. So now you have 2 points in time that you could look at and say, we're going to land somewhere in that zip code between those two things. Yeah. That's okay, because you're not really coercing the team in any way to increase their velocity. You're simply reusing. It's what do they call that? A backward-looking number, or I don't know.
Yesterday's weather.
Yesterday's weather.
I understand that. I'm just saying. I think the legitimate case here is, I'm the product owner. You're the scrum master. I would say, this team did 13 last sprint and 30 the next sprint and 3 the sprint afterwards. And this sprint they're on track to do, I don't know, maybe 5 or whatever. Velocity's all over the place. I need some kind of stable forecast, some kind of stable velocity, because I, as a product person, I can't really forecast. The team is all over the place, and now I'm engaging you as a scrum master to say, I'm trying to think of how a product person that I've worked with before that's like kind of removed from the team, that doesn't really like sit on the team every day. Like, these are the product people that will tell you stuff like what I'm saying.
Sure.
I need you to help the team to make them more stable. I need the velocity to stabilize. They'll say I need the velocity to increase, but the between the lines message there is, I just need a stable number.
Yeah.
I can't have 3 one sprint and 30 the next sprint and 0 the sprint after that. I can't keep doing that.
Absolutely. I think that's a legitimate ask as well. I mean, that's the reason why we have fixed time boxes, right? As sprints. So in order to forecast, when they're asking for that, that's legit. As a Scrum Master, I'd be looking at the team thinking, what are some of the issues they're encountering that are causing these fluctuations? Let's try and address those.
Big swings.
And then automatically, your velocity will stabilize. You're not looking to explicitly say, hey, team, you need to increase your velocity. You're saying, what are some of the things that are stopping us from delivering what we want to deliver? I would tackle it from that perspective. But the ask to use a number like velocity for predictability purposes, I think that's a legit ask.
We mentioned the KPI thing, even though we didn't really dig into that. But the other thing I dealt with that I can speak on is program level standardization. So you're working in a program, so you have many, many teams. Let's say you have 8, 10 teams, and they want the velocity of all the teams to be basically equalized. Which you and I are like, oh yeah, equalized. Like you're kind of being silly.
Yeah.
Come on, what are we doing here? There's scaling models out there that do ask for some kind of equalization to happen, or at least if equalization is not happening, at least a backlog with a certain number of points, and then knowing the forecast of each team, they want the points of each team to be standardized between teams. So that you can generally tell, like, oh, Team A does 30 points a sprint, Team B does 25, but those points between the two are the same estimates somehow, magically.
Yeah, magically,
I don't know how.
Again, I think what's underlying what you're saying is really the ability or the need, I should say, not even the ability, the need to forecast. So instead of one, you have n number of teams.
Yeah.
Where things get tricky is when they say, well, we need the teams to standardize, right? That's where things get tricky because, as we know, teams are unique and you shouldn't really be standardizing or comparing them that way. But it's legit to say Team A has their normal natural velocity at a certain point. Uncoerced, it is the output measure looking back. Team B has another measure, etc. And you can look at those and say that the whole product backlog has 100 story point, whatever it is, based on this speed and this speed, we can deliver the solution and multiply it by the number of teams, of course, right? You can do it that way. That is okay. But once again, you shouldn't be looking at a single point. You should always be looking at ranges. If you take a range for each team and you come up with an answer, or you take the answer and put a range in, there has to be a range. That's my view on this.
Yeah. I almost want to go down the last road of why people ask and dig into KPIs, but it's not like I want to have a whole podcast about KPIs, specifically targeting bad KPIs. Like, how do you know that you're being given a bad KPI? But I kind of want to dip into this here because, again, I've been in organizations where velocity becomes a KPI. Your productivity of your team members, or whatever you want to use, utilization, whatever. Yeah. A lot of times when I find this, I find that there's somebody in the hierarchy that used to be a project manager or is a project manager that is dictating this kind of KPI. And it might not even be a well thought out thing. It might literally be management asked me, like some C-level executive or some director or whatever, management asked me for my KPIs, and here's what I made up. Here's the things that I think lines of code per developer or whatever. Like, just terrible KPIs. Just because they're flailing, responding to what management is asking them for. When, again, somebody in the management read some book that mentioned KPIs and they're like, oh, we should be doing that.
What do we ever do before KPIs? No, they're so misunderstood, to your point.
What do we do before KPIs? I mean, how about delivering software to the customer? Are they getting software on a regular cadence? Are they happy about that? Because
that should be the KPI.
That should be the number one KPI. Are they getting software on a regular basis? Which is consequently when people ask me in interviews, product interviews, hey, what are some metrics that we can know if we're doing a good job with our product or not? I will tell them, number one thing you should be measuring is, am I delivering on a regular cadence to my customers? And number two thing is my customer happy with what I'm delivering to them? Either of those two things I said, neither of those you get out of any of this.
That's right. You're absolutely spot on with that. And at the end of the day, is the customer getting what they paid for? in a timely manner, and is it of good quality such that they're happy? That's really it.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of people get OKRs mixed up with KPIs, and it's like
So
You know?
too many three-letter acronyms for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm out.
Yeah,
Can't.
we can dice those in another podcast maybe, but
Certainly should.
you're right about certain people. Typically, they tend to be middle managers just because they grew up that way, knowing the old way of utilization, efficiency, that mindset. So those kinds of metrics, and they're the ones that are more likely to say, "Why is your velocity down this sprint? It's down by 5%. What's going on?" Right? In other words, we think your team is not working. They're only working 95% of the capacity they should be working at.
That's an interesting. We haven't touched that topic until now. That's an interesting one. So we should stop and talk about that one, because you turned in. Let's go in an extreme example. Because you turned in 50% less story points. Normally you did 36 story points. This sprint you turned in 18. We think you slackers were only working 50% of the time. So you've only been punching out 20 hours a week.
Yeah.
And you've been taking long vacations or whatever. Is that the message that people are getting from velocity? Because the story point numbers do not in any way, shape, or form reflect the actual number of hours worked. And the interesting part about this, which kind of jumps into what we're going to finish this podcast with, which is alternate methods of measuring velocity. Like what instead of velocity, what are the alternates you could talk about? Because I could easily see someone saying, well, if you can't get me this productivity number with velocity, then we should start using hours, and I need to track the number of hours that each developer works on. Good luck with that.
Absolutely. So the number of hours is much more easy to game, right, than even story points, because story points require some kind of consensus across the team when you're estimating. The number of hours is you can call it whatever story points you want. I can go ahead and create 20 tasks, 6 hours apiece for that 2-point story, because that's what I think is going to take to get this done, right? And on top of that, I have the freedom to say, well, when I get into it and I find it's worse than I thought it was, I can make it bigger. So that's definitely gameable, and that's what the teams will do if you're measuring hours. Yeah. Unfortunately, there are some frameworks out there that promote this, which is horrible. But yes, they do. One story point should take a day, right? That's crazy. It's madness. But they do promote that. So I think savvy teams figure that out. Savvy teams are like, okay, we're delivering at a certain cadence. It's a natural cadence, not what we aspire to on purpose. Right. And this sprint, we went 50% less. Now, that doesn't mean the team only worked half the time or anything crazy like that. It simply means there are one or more reasons why that is. And the savvy teams will reflect back and go, what happened here? Yeah, right. And part of the discovery might even be, well, we only delivered 50%, but we delivered the right 50%. Because we had to pull things out and pull more things in, etc. So the net is, yes, it looks like a lower delivery level, but the customer is happy because we're meeting their needs.
The product perspective that I bring to this one is I care less about velocity. I actually care about the number of business value we're delivering, because that means that customers are happy, and then we get some bandwidth to do things that don't really stack up to business value, but we might need to do. We might need to do a whole bunch of technical deep dive, super deep work or whatever that like customers are never going to see. I've been through a bunch of teams at this point where we introduce DevOps practices to the teams, and they learn how to deploy things through pipelines and deploy their configs to machines through pipelines, and they get done with like middle of the night pajama parties and get over with that kind of stuff and move into deployments through good CI/CD processes. Mm-hmm. That stuff doesn't have a business value because, again, people could argue like, oh, totally have business value. To me, it's not external facing, so it doesn't have business value externally. Yes, I could argue There are customers, internal, whatever, other development teams that fit. Yeah, okay, all right. But the point of me saying this is when you're only looking at velocity, meaning the pure amount of complexity delivered sprint over sprint. I mean, that focus is so narrow, and it really only focuses on the individual team. It's only useful to the team that's delivering it. I would argue it's not a useful number for me, the product owner, when I go to my product organization meetings, when I go to director of product, VP, chief product officer, whatever. I mean, when I go to meetings with those type of people, and I'm saying, oh, hey, my team delivered X amount of business value to customers, and I'm having those conversations, and I'm having to explain dips and spikes, right? No, we delivered 20 business value points, which is twice as much as what we normally do. Oh, it's because 2 sprints ago we invested in this technical thing, and now that my team spent a lot of time a couple sprints ago integrating all of our stuff in the new modern CI/CD processes, or now that we as an organization brought on this other team who's purely involved in empowering the other developers and setting up tools and setting up environments and rolling things, infrastructure as code. My team doesn't have to mess with that. So that's why we're delivering a lot more business value, because we have this other team who's basically delivering no business value now, and they're completely dedicated to developing tools for my and other development teams' developers. Now I, the product person, get to lobby for other pieces of the business. There's a systemic level. What's a holistic level? What am I looking for? What's the word I'm looking for now? I know
what you mean.
Yeah, there's a systems thinking perspective, view or perspective involved at this point, and I get to lobby for that in a way where I'm saying, because we have this other team or these other teams enabling us, we get to now deliver more value.
Absolutely. So I think it's an investment really at that stage, right?
Yeah.
It's an investment in yourself. When I say yourself, I mean in the organization, to increase its capacity to deliver more later.
Yeah.
So it's seen as that. And a prudent product owner would probably be looking for those kinds of opportunities where possible. Let's just put it that way, right? And allowing for that when they're going to that product council to represent what was done, they could very legitimately say, we delivered this amount of business value, 3 bushels worth, whatever, however you're going to measure it. But we also did this other work that's going to help us in the future.
Yeah.
I see no reason why anybody in executive teams would frown on that, because you're investing at that stage, right? Yeah. But you're also not just investing, you're also delivering value. I just want to go back to this, since you mentioned business value as a potential measure.
Yeah.
The biggest difference, for those of you who are not using business value, the biggest difference between business value and story points is the team assigns story points to the work items, but the product owner assigns the business value to these work items. So by properly managing the backlog, the product owner is saying these are the right items to deliver from a business value perspective. The highest business value is priority 1, next one's priority 2, etc. And if the team delivers those, even though the story points on those things, which are not even relatable to each other, right?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
Something that's a business value of 1 might be quite complex to do, and that might be a story point of 8. So they're not even equivalent in any way, shape, or form. If you're delivering those business values, regardless of the actual magnitude of that measure, you're delivering the right things to the business. So who cares if your velocity dropped by half? You still delivered the right business value that was prescribed by the product owner.
Yeah. Well, again, we go back to the holy grail of this topic is stability.
Yes.
Stability. I mean, velocity will go up and down, sprint over sprint, depending on what's happening. Like your people could go on vacation. Team members could go on vacation.
Yeah, people get COVID, whatever.
Yeah, and people could. Oh my goodness, people could get sick. Who knows?
Right.
Again, like velocity can go up and down based on vacation. I mean, velocity can go up and down based on we started on something and we thought it was straightforward, and then we didn't, and then we encountered something we didn't expect. Or velocity could go up and down as, hey, we guessed that this was a 5, but since we've never been in that part of the code, or since it's been 2 years since we've been in that part of the code, we were wrong and it's bigger. Like, what are you going to do if someone's wrong in their estimate? You're going to stop working on something?
Right.
You're going to start and then realize it's going to be more and then stop working on something? Is that what you're going to do? You're going to change your numbers as you're on the fly or whatever and pull stuff out to, here's my product. I guess I'm pushing back. Here we go. Let's say, you're the Scrum Master, I'm the product person. We start in a sprint, we got 20 points planned, right? I don't even know how 20 points. I guess 2 8s and 2 2s. 2 8s and 1... whatever. Yeah. 2 8s and 2 2s.
Five.
There we go.
4 5s. Let's just make it simple.
4 5s. Let's say we have 20 points, and then the team starts on one of the 8s, knocks it out, starts on the other 8, and is like, this 8 really is way more complicated. It probably needs to be a 13. Should they re-estimate the 8 as a 13, and then that be our trigger to reevaluate and knock out some of the other stories that are in the sprint at a lower priority and knock them out and then re-estimate the thing? Or should they keep the 8 as an 8 and just let the unfinished work get pushed out of the sprint and just let what is happen? Because I hear people tell me that all the time. I've heard that many times on teams, like, oh, now that we're in the story, we think it's bigger than we thought, and should we go back and re-estimate it and do that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so those are just two potential ways of handling it. There are probably just as many more, if not more. What should they do? It depends. It depends on what the team wants to do, and the team here is not just the development team. This is the entire team. So this is an opportunity to have a discussion with the product owner and say, look, we thought it was an 8. It really is more complex, and it's a 13. What do you want us to do? Continue on this one because it is higher in your priority list? Right. Or do we knock out a couple of others and come back to this? The other way that can happen is we got into this and now we've learned more that leads us to say we need to do something else.
That's what I'm thinking. That's the case I'm thinking of.
Yeah, before we can proceed. And here, just look for guidance from your product or from a business perspective on what to do. There isn't a prescription that says always do this. Yeah. Right? That's fraught with danger. Yeah. But what you should not do is to say, we thought it was an 8, it's a 13, we're going to keep plodding away because there's a risk you're not going to deliver it. And you'd rather have that conversation when you find out as opposed to at the end and get into the defensive posture and go, we had all these issues, right? That's why we didn't deliver. Yeah. So it's too late at that point.
If there's a good tactic to use here, would it be, we got into this, we learned more once we started it, we got with the product owner, and we decided this 8 is actually an 8 and a 5. We're going to split the story into an 8 and a 5. One of them will stay in the sprint and basically replace the story that's in here, and the other one will go back into the backlog. Or one of them will become a 5 and then bump all the rest of the stuff out of the current sprint and jump into the sprint. I kind of think either of those are okay. I don't know if I have a strong opinion about either of those. I think the reason I bring that up is because if we're just looking at velocity, like in that case where we bumped 2 items that were 2s, we bumped 4 points out, we replace it with a brand new story that was a 5. So really the team committed to 1 extra point, right? Your velocity is really not going to go up or down at 1 point other than what you estimated. Yeah. So there's not a big game happening at that point.
Right. You know what I mean? Exactly. Nobody dies on that hill.
Yeah,
for
right.
1 point.
Yeah.
Right?
No, nobody does. But again, I go back to what we brought up was the goal you should be looking for is if you're looking at anything for velocity, the goal you should be looking for is stability. And again, the situation we just highlighted, the ups and downs, the up in that one would be like, well, 4 points came out, but 5 points came in. So you went up 1 point. Sprint over sprint, assuming you're fairly stable, right. You went up 1 point this sprint. But the team could have decided, when they get to the end of the sprint, they realize they actually can't finish the 5 point story. It was too much. So now your velocity dips 4 in that sprint because you made that. So again, I'm bringing this up to say the reason that your dip happened in that sprint is because the whole team collective, product owner, Scrum Master, team members, whatever, you all made a collective agreement. You were taking a chance that, hey, we think we could do whatever, you know what I mean? But you're guaranteed next sprint you can knock out that 5-point story. So you're going to take it in the next sprint.
Yeah.
But in the charts, you're going to see a dip. I'm bringing this up because I'm trying to say I don't think that there is any kind of alternate you can do in that situation to make it better. I think if you're dealing with that and there was a dip in velocity, first of all, who cares? Second of all, I'm putting the product owner back in the lead position to say they should say, I was the one, once the team discovered they got into this old legacy code set and they realized if I was going to do this interaction with the database and pull it apart, I was actually going to have to interact with this and this other thing that we didn't know about. I made the call to try to do it in the sprint, but we ended up not being able to make it. But I made that call. If the product owner is not putting themselves ahead of all those discussions, and somehow it goes back to the Scrum Master to have to walk that back with the product organization and some kind of scaled agile delivery organization, lead, whatever, project manager, potentially right now. Mm-hmm. Like they may be able, because they should have been in all the conversations, they may be able to follow all the conversations and repeat back all the same talking points. They should be like, hang on a second, let me get you the product owner. Let me bring them into this session that we're talking about this, because they made the call. And that sounds to me like throwing off the responsibility to somebody else. You know what I mean? Like throwing somebody else under the bus.
Yeah.
That's what it sounds like. However, that is the product owner's responsibility in the organization. So it should be completely okay to say, hang on a second, let me get you, the product owner, to explain this spike or dip. I kind of feel if I were some kind of chief officer involved with products, I kind of would want explanations with regard to dips, but I also would want explanations with regard to massive spikes. Sure. I would want to talk about, hey, what happened with this massive spike? Oh, well, I split my team in half, and I, one product owner, I am now going to 2 separate team events. I hold 2 separate backlogs. You don't see it at the high level. It just looks like my velocity doubled because now I have 2 teams that are much, much, much smaller, but my time went from 20% to 40%. But because now that you're using nearly half my time, you're getting almost twice, well, actually probably more than twice the development productivity because we split the teams. And you probably won't see that because your product events, I was going to say roadmaps, but it's not roadmaps. It's a higher level than that. Your product delivery will probably be divided on product lines and or product owner lines. So you'll just see product or product owner. You won't see the teams involved in each. So you'll just see, oh, this product now is getting double what you expect in terms of features per sprint or per quarter. If you're a chief product officer, you're probably not looking at sprint. You're probably looking at a larger snapshot. Yeah. So you'll just see like a rapid speeding up of delivery of features, and you won't have a deeper level than that.
Right. No, you're right on what you just said. So just to unpack a little bit, whenever there's this forum where the Scrum Master finds himself, herself having to defend the dips, the product owner should be there in that meeting to say, this is what happened from a business standpoint. I made this call. This is why what happened. Same thing with peaks.
Yeah.
Right? It's the product owner who should be delivering that message and not really just the Scrum Master. Why is your team underperforming? But that's what I see more often than not. That's what I see in organizations where it's an inquisition. It's the Scrum Master that's being called in and say, hey, what happened? Look, your teams are not delivering now. Right? So that is such a disconnect
I know I'm looking for points to interject and argue now. I don't see how you can just talk to one person to get that response. I don't see how you can finger point at the Scrum Master. Like you need to say, I need to sit down with the Scrum Master and the product owner and maybe my senior engineer on the team or a rep, or somebody on the team. You know what I mean? At least a member from the team to sit down and say, like, what is going on with this team's velocity? What's happening?
Unfortunately, though, you're right. That would be great, right? But unfortunately, I don't see that very often.
Oh well, nobody in that, like a project manager or a VP or something. Like nobody wants to sit down. Like they want to be the Inquisition. They don't want to sit down with the Inquisition.
That's
like,
right.
They don't. Like nobody expects a Spanish Inquisition. Like nobody. Nobody. They don't want to walk in the room with a gang of people and be like, hey, I got a problem with all of you, the mob or whatever. Like they're not going to put themselves in that position.
That's right.
Where I was going with my kind of product tangent that I went on was saying, if you are examining dips in velocity, you should also equally be examining spikes in velocity. You should have to explain both of them. So you should be looking for, I guess the summary that we're going into. The summary is you should be looking for stability in your velocity. If you're looking for velocity at all. If you care about velocity at all, which
you shouldn't. Really.
I think we're both settling on.
Yeah.
Again, product person, teams person. I could care less about velocity.
That's right.
I care about the amount of business value you're delivering. Okay. And if we're dipping in business value, it's because we're doing other things. And I have to explain that other things. Usually I would tag out with my development director, operations person, or whatever. Sometimes some companies I've been at operations and in charge of infrastructure.
Sure.
To say, hey, the reason that we're dipping is because we're involved in these other infrastructure projects or deep technical debt type of stuff. And I'll let this person talk about it. And that person should be competent enough and informed enough to talk about why we're pausing on customer-centric features to deal with things that we have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more right there from what you just said. That person should be, well, first they should be in the room, right?
Oh, yeah.
Don't get the wrong person in and just simply grill them, right, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, look, if you're running a marathon, you really don't want to be counting the number of steps every mile. That doesn't do any good.
Yeah.
And that's really what velocity is. It might, from the runner's perspective, I doubt that runners actually do this, but it might because they're trying to pace themselves, let's say.
Right, yeah.
But I think all of that is really just kind of shaping up into that point you made about consistency. You want consistency so you can predict.
Yeah,
so as a runner, I know I'm doing, I'm making up a number, 1,000 steps in an hour. I know I've got so many hours left based on my previous performance, whatever. You see what I'm going.
Yeah.
Consistency is key here. So consistency is key is the first message, but above that, zero. Really the top message is velocity is a vanity metric. It doesn't add any business value to talk about it, much less examine dips and all of that. Just use business value. Now, the teams can use velocity, don't get me wrong, but don't die on that, right? It's just get your product organization, your product people involved in assigning business value and really just metering that over time.
Yeah. I'd be interested if you had a big program, like you had 7 teams working out of one backlog, for example, because I've been on programs like that, 7 teams working on one backlog. I'd be interested to see just a report of 0, +1, -1, and that's all that's on the chart of like this team did lower than their last velocity, this team did more than their last velocity, and that's it on the chart. Let's just start with that. It's like teams go up or down or whatever, because over time you don't want to compare teams' velocity across teams, but what you could do is you could show the fluctuations at a high level. You can show all the teams on one graph. Maybe not in the. I guess you could show them in one graph, but if you got a lot of teams, it's going to start being real. It's going to start being pretty ridiculous of a graph, like as far as like a line graph, right?
Yeah.
But I'm thinking if they're all starting from 0, I wouldn't call it. I probably would call it 1. I wouldn't call it 0, right? Because 0 has a connotation, right?
Yes,
but the idea is, are my teams stable? Are they dipping? And if they are dipping, that's okay. If they're dipping or whatever, and then they go down, up, or whatever, and then they stabilize. Like some teams will stabilize at 1, Some teams will stabilize at -1. Some teams will stabilize at 0. They go up a little bit in the middle, but I would expect the overall over time graph to be stable. I think it would be interesting to show if you could feed all the velocity data, like if you use Jira or Azure DevOps or whatever, and you feed all the velocity data or whatever back to a spreadsheet, but then normalize it somehow.
So you're really discussing tracking variance.
That's it. That's it. Just tracking variance. Just tracking variance so I can talk to whatever organization all your Scrum Masters work for. If they all roll up to an Agile coach, or if they all roll up to some kind of Agile practice or whatever, some kind of community practice, they can just throw all this stuff up on a screen and say, a health check overall, we look stable. Or overall, we look like we're generally declining over time. And they're asking that question because they're trying to say, what are the reasons? They're looking for the Scrum Masters on the teams to throw out the reasons. Now, if you have 3 teams that are generally up here and stable, and one team that just decline over time, again, it's not a forum to punish people. It's certainly not a KPI or metric.
No,
certainly not. But it's a forum to bring up questions and ask, like, what is happening with XYZ? Anything that deviates from the norm. Why is that deviating from the norm? And again, I bring it back to, if it's wildly running away, being successful, what's happening there? I need to know what's happening there.
Yep.
Same thing as the one that's declining. I need to know what's happening. Oh, the one that's declining. Oh, well, they all work on, I've been on a team like this before. They all work on legacy products. They don't do anything new. You know what I mean? Every 6 months, you're going to lose a developer because they're tired of working on old stuff. They never get to touch anything new. They never get to work on the newest products. You just know attrition's going to kill that team over time. And the company understands that, and the company is fine with that. They do understand it. So there are, like, that would be a trend of, like, just slowly over time, you lose velocity as you lose team members as they leave. And as they leave, because there's no money in that product, you're not replacing them. So just the variance trend, I think, would be an actual useful thing to track.
I agree. I'm liking this. I'm going to actually try this one out. So there's a variation of the variant. What SAFE recommends, by tracking the whole set of teams, and then they put the band up going, you should be somewhere between 85 and 100%. Yeah. That I'm not really too much of a fan of, only because you can see the actuals for every team on there, and then fingers get pointed. Yeah, it has its uses, though. Its use is to look at it from a macro lens and say, as a program, they call it as a release train, are you on track to get to a station, right? That's really the only question, rather than looking lower levels than that at any specific team. But the variance would be good. I think that if you imagine something like, let's say, half a dozen teams and you're plotting the variance, if there are any coincidentals, like the variance went down over a sprint or two, short period of time really, for most teams, maybe not all, but most teams, some event happened, right? Some point in time event happened, and you can correlate it back to that. So I think that's where the discussions could be had. I'm going to try that one out.
Yeah, every team's velocity is different, so you'd have to come up with some kind of standard deviation formula.
It's pretty straightforward. I mean, whatever team A's velocity is, any variation thereof, it's just for team A.
It is. For example, if team A is 20 points per sprint, and somehow a team that turned in 20 turned in 40, they'd be a full standard deviation above where their normal is. You have to figure out what the norm is and then predict up or down. I don't think you would get full standard deviations. I think you would get like 0.2, 0.4, 0.6 or whatever. Probably in 10% increments is probably the way you would measure that graph. 10% up or down. But also, while I'm talking about it, 10% even matter, but I mean, if you're this person who's asking for KPIs or whatever, like 10% productivity year over year or whatever, like maybe 10% actually matters to you. I also do have to point out, like, if you're caring about 10% year over year productivity, I think you're caring about the wrong things. Of course. Right.
As often is the case with measures like KPIs, most commonly that's the wrong ones that are being tracked.
Well, we brought this topic up because I've heard this many, many times, especially as part of larger programs. I hear this a lot as part of larger programs. Oh, your team has to increase its velocity. We need more velocity out of you.
That's right. Pull up your socks. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, hey, if this topic was helpful, or if you have other topics that might be more helpful, leave them in the comments.
Yeah, and don't forget to smash that like button.